So I come from a kind of critical geography, political geography background. So for me, maps reinscribe and reproduce power in space. They do this through naming. You can see here on the map what is named within Seattle in 1901. They do this through assigning real estate, who owns this land, and then they kind of just giving a general sense of order. And their perspective from above makes maps seem objective, and they benefit from their relationship to positivism and science and kind of the truth. We just heard from Stephen as well that maps are seductive. We heard from Marissa about kind of the colonial legacies of maps that disregard the kind of local populations when they are being made. So, as we kind of all know, maps have authors, and authors make decisions about what, who, and where are being represented and how they're represented. And here I really kind of appreciate the work of Swati Chattopadhyay on kind of maps and power and representation. Things get excluded, so one must choose what to include, and the choices. That's where the politics reside. What are the choices? How do you choose? What is your method? There is no objective map. There cannot be. So I graduated college, and I was like, I want to be a freelance cartographer, but of course, I was also like, all maps lie, and I didn't get many clients, but that's all right. But then one day on the radio in the summer of 2015, I heard this interview with our new poet laureate, Claudia Castro Luna, and she was putting forth this idea for a cartographic project. She said, imagine Seattle's map, and on top of that, we layer a grid of poems written by kids in schools, written by senior citizens, people in Pea Patches, our community gardens, and youth in high schools. And this was kind of the natural culmination of her work, being her background is in both poetry as well as urban planning. So this kind of seemed natural to her. And to me, I was just really excited that we would kind of have a map that embraces kind of multiple authors, that you'd problematize the kind of traditional map by bringing up multiple experiences, identities, subjectivities. And so I ultimately met Claudia about a year later, working on a different project, and I was like, did you make the map yet? And she's like, no, I haven't. And I was like, we got to make the map. So I hadn't done any interactive maps before. I just done kind of Illustrator static maps. So I was like, I don't know, but I put these mock-ups together in Illustrator, and I was just like, we can figure it out when we get to the interactive part. It actually wasn't too difficult. In the end, we used Carto, or CartoDB at that time, and that allowed for kind of the styling and of the map and the data. The most kind of difficult part when you start, uploading poetry to a map specifically, or to a spreadsheet is, how do you actually get the formatting, the spaces? So we would receive these very perfectly spatialized sets of words, the poetry, and we'd have to kind of, work our way through, what is the spreadsheet going to accept, and then how will the map actually project it? So, we created these weird kind of HTML poems that would start to kind of actually allow the user to experience the correctly spaced poem. So it took about 6 months of sort of collecting and editing the poetry, as well as uploading and formatting it, and then we launched the Seattle Poetic Grid at Open Books, which is an actual poetry bookstore in Seattle, in June 2017, with about 78 poems on it. So the grid features poems from people across the city of different levels of writing experience, different ages, different languages, and all the poems are deeply personal. These poems are the personal geographies that I feel are often lost in kind of, when we start making decisions on maps themselves. Many of the maps capture a changing Seattle, so I've pulled a couple here from kind of my neighborhood, around my neighborhood that I can read. Another Rehab in the CD by Rachel Kessler at 26th Ave and Yesler Way. Let the old houses be, let the long lawn wave in quiet defiance. Let the red, restless maw of new construction be silent. Let werewolf mutter along rafters, gnawing these good bones. Let the porch slope, let the screen door creak open to cracked street. Let damp air blow through, let the old houses sing. Let their rooms rattle, full of grandmas and aunties, and kids and cousins. Let needle touch black pool of vinyl. Let bass bottom out, speakers shiver floorboards. Let broke down cars bloom dandelions like they did in our youth. Let blue tarp fray in the rain. Let the old houses be. And then another one, kind of even closer to me, this is an excerpt from Strange Homecoming by Bong Win at Linda's Tavern, which is on Capitol Hill in Seattle. That was the Bauhaus Cafe. See, the front door frame still looks like it sort of, I know, it's gone. And what used to be, I know, it's gone too. Oh, that's the block that used to be Tug's Gay Bar, next to King Cobra at the Irish Bar. I know, it's gone. And that was Bill's Pizza. Well, that huge hole used to be Bill's. You can still tell because it's next door to Linda's Tavern, the only place still there. Whoa, you don't recognize anything? No, man. It's just terraformed and replaced an alien urban landscape. So we really start to get a feeling through language of what these spaces are. It's a very kind of qualitative mapping, I think. For me, at least, brings up quite a bit more emotion than just seeing data mapped, for instance. And then in 2018, Claudia was actually named the Washington State Poet Laureate, and she just comes up and she's like, Greg, can we do this for the entire state now? And I was like, all right, well, let's figure that out. So we ended up doing it for the entire state. We released this earlier this year, back in April, and it's called Washington Poetic Routes. And it consists of 96 poems, and on this map, people were asked to submit poems for consideration. We got essentially like thousands of submissions. We had lesson plans that were especially aimed at kind of youth and different people who hadn't written poetry before, about how to write poems of place. And so all these poems really consist of personal landmarks and landscapes and topographies. And again, contributors were at these different kind of levels of experience, ages, histories, geographies. And notably, there are quite a few from students in elementary school all the way through kind of high school. So one of our favorites actually comes from a fifth grader in Brewster. And so this is, it was from a prompt about window pictures. What can you see from your window? So by Jacob Monaco from Brewster Grade School. When I look out my bus window, I see trees with apples, golden and red, tractors big as large stones. I see ladders propped on trees to pick the ones that are higher, which is just like a really simple poem, but it's kind of so evocative of the images that it brings up. And then finally, since we are here in Tacoma, I pulled up the kind of the poem that we have for Tacoma. And all rain is holy water, she says. It's an excerpt from that. Gwendolyn Morgan in Tacoma. 3 raccoons came to the bird feeder this morning before she had her first cup of hibiscus tea, before it started raining. A woman was taken off a TriMet bus yesterday by ICE. On her way to work, she was late. She's in the detention center in Tacoma. Her children in custody in Portland. It is raining between them. The fog rises from the Columbia River. A great blue heron lifts its wings, rises along the mud flats. Her family in Oaxaca, Otavalo, her family in Rose City Park, her family in detention, her family in deportation proceedings. So these are just kind of a few examples from the 2 maps, and they can be found to kind of explore more at seattlepoeticgrid.com and washingtonpoeticroutes.com. But I just sort of want to end on kind of what can poetry teach cartography. And for me, the poems reflect this statement from Adrienne Rich. Most often, someone writing a poem believes in, depends on, a delicate, vibrating range of difference, that an I can become a we without extinguishing others, that a partly common language exists, to which strangers can bring their own heartbeat, memories, and images. And so often I feel that maps really do kind of extinguish through the decisions that we kind of make and what we show. They almost try to force a we through space as opposed to providing a means by which to create one. So by rewriting this map, these 2 maps with poetry, I hope that new connections that start from and embrace difference are possible. Tyon J. Coleman has also written quite a bit about representation within poems and maps, and she put together this great collection in Places Journal titled Poems as Maps, and solicited a collection of amazing poetry. But she goes on to write, there are relief maps that accentuate uneven terrain. They as in the poems, they are relief maps that accentuate uneven terrain. They reveal ridges and hollows that are invisible on the standard road maps drawn by cartographers working within dominant systems and institutions, and the maps that silence most voices and narratives. So for her, the poems serve as these maps that have been unmapped previously. I'll just conclude with the poem that Claudia often concludes on, because I think it's at the heart of these projects, and I think that it's important for us to keep in mind as we sort of search for cartographies of difference and for self-representation. So this poem is situated at our City Hall in Seattle, and it's called A Corner to Love by Claudia Castro Luna. Maps of the city number in the thousands, unique and folded neatly inside each citizen's heart. We live in the city, and the city lives in us. Thank you.